Why do people buy property in a family trust? What are some of the advantages and the disadvantage of buying property in a family trust? In this video, I am going to share with you all these informations, and at the end, I am going to share that what is my favorite, how do I invest. So if this interests you, stick around. The number one reason people buy property in a family trust is because of the asset protection. Now, what do you mean by asset protection? It actually means that if you buy all your properties in your own name and if you are sued for whatever reason, then all these properties are up for grab and all this property can be taken away because of the amount of money that is being sued. Let's say all your property has an equity of $1 million and somebody sued you for whatever reason, and that has been also, let's say, about 800,000. Then 800,000 would be taken from this $1 million. Whereas if you buy the property in a trust and all these properties, let's say you have 2-3 different trusts and each one has his 300,000 equity. First of all, if you are personally sued, then none of these trusts would be touched. You can't, because the trust, buying property in a family trust is not your property, is the family trust who owns the property. So because it is not yours, so that cannot be touched. So that is one of the number one reason, is to asset protection, to protect your all the other asset. You don't put all the eggs in the same baskets, you just actually make it separate, and that is the biggest advantage, which is asset protection. The second advantage of buying property in a trust is tax minimization. If the property in a trust is earning, let's say, $10,000 after paying all the expenses, that $10,000 profit can be distributed to some of the other family members who have a less bracket in terms of tax. So as a result, they will pay much less tax. Now consider whereas if you buy all this property in your own name, then what happens is that 10,000 is add up to your marginal tax rate, and if you are already earning a high income, then you have to pay those extra tax amount to the government. So tax minimization is an effective strategy of buying property in a trust. When you buy a property, if you are taking 80 to 90% LVR, then chances are that it is not as much positive cash flow. But as it progresses, once that LVR goes down to 40-50%, or even you fully paid up property, then tax minimization is a very effective strategy, particularly buying property in a trust. And the third advantage is succession planning. When you buy a property in your own name, and if you want to pass it on to the next generation, then you have to actually pay a stamp duty once you transfer the property to your son or daughter or whoever you want to give it to. Whereas if the property is actually bought in a trust, and then all you have to do is that you have to change the director and the shareholder of the company, who is the trustee of the trust, and then that person can control the trust. So the ownership of the property is still in the trust. However, whoever is actually managing that is basically going to control. Remember, buying a property in a trust basically is the control. It's not the ownership. Ownership remains within the trust. However, if you are the owner, if you are the director of the company and the shareholder of the company, and the company controls the trust, in other words, you are actually controlling everything. So buying a property in a trust, these are the three advantages that we have, particularly in a family trust. Bear in mind though, when you set up a trust, it's actually, in Australia, it's for 80 years, and after 80 years you need to dissolve and you need to form another trust. But 80 years is a long time. It's about 2-3 generations. Who knows what's going to happen after 80 years. Now, apart from these advantages, there are some other disadvantages also. Particularly if you buy a property which is a negative gearing, then the negative gearing cannot be offset with your personal income. If you buy a property in a trust, then the negative component, which is the losses, needs to be quarantined within the trust, and it needs to offset in the next year, the year after, when it makes a profit, before it can start distributing the profit. So negative gearing cannot be offset with your personal income if you buy a property in a trust. The second disadvantage is about loan structure. When you buy a property in your own name, then the bank is going to, even though it's an investment property, bank is going to give it to you loan very easily. Whereas if you buy in a trust, in a family trust, then most of the bank might not lend you. So you have to go to a specific lender, and sometimes the interest rate can be a little bit up as well as compared to buying a property in your own name. You need to understand your circumstances before you set up a family trust and buy a property in a family trust. The third disadvantage is about the cost or the annual maintenance. When you set up a trust, then the initial setup cost is quite a lot. As compared to if you buy on your own name, there is no cost. All you need to put is in the contract that is your own name. Whereas if you buy in a trust, in a family trust, then you need to set it up and you need to pay to your accountant, lawyer, and regular maintenance. Every year you need to make sure that it is compliant. You need to pay to ASIC and all other expenses. So it is one of the big disadvantages that continuously every year you have to pay some amount, you have to spend some amount to make it compliant. Another disadvantage that we have is the land tax. Some states, if you buy in your own name, you have a maximum land tax exemption, whereas if you buy in your trust, then your land tax exemption can be less, and in some circumstances it can be even zero. So if same property, if you buy in your own name, you might have to pay less land tax or even no land tax, whereas if you buy in a trust, then you might have to pay a significant amount of land tax every year. So that is another disadvantage of buying property in a trust. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of buying property in a trust. Now, how do I approach when you buy an investment property? Although there are multiple things that needs to be considered of what kind of structure and what needs to be done, and I'm not giving any, this is a general advice. However, I would go a simple approach of buying my first property in my own name, and the second property in my spouse name, and the third property in a trust, and fourth property in a different trust, and the fifth property might be another trust, and sixth property I might go to my wife's name or my name. Like that, you can spread it a little bit and make sure that you are in the middle zone. You are not paying too much of land tax, you are not paying too much of compliance, at the same time not all your assets on the same basket. Remember, if you buy all 3, 4, 5 or even 10 properties in your own name, then it is a very difficult to have that kind of situation in case if you get sued. Whereas if you just spread a little bit but not going all the property in a trust is probably the best way. So that's how I look at it, and I would always go with buying property in a trust, at the same time buying property in my own name as well. If you find this video is helpful, then like this video, subscribe my channel and turn the notification bell on. It will really help me a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.